Hello and welcome to the Monster Mechanics Podcast, where we take creatures of myth and media and see how they can be improved. I am your host, Scott Paladin, and with me as always is the President Jimmy Carter to my giant swamp rabbit, Zach Jaquays. What are we talking about today, Zach?
Today we are talking about Weeping Angels.
Weeping Angels are from the Doctor Who franchise of sci-fi. Mm-hmm. So we actually do have a canon on these, although we're going to mostly ignore as much of it as possible because I think it's a little bit stupid.
As we do.
Yep. Weeping Angels are, I think they were originally created for the episode Blink from the date.
Yeah, was it Blink or Don't Blink?
Don't Blink, something like that. It was from the David Tennant era. It's actually it's a very good episode from that series, and they're statues of angels, weeping angels. Often they're usually covering their own faces, which is why they're called weeping. And turns out they're actually an alien from the start of time, and while they are being observed, they can't move. But when you look away, then they can move, and they come closer and closer to attack you. And it's a brilliant image. It's been adapted in a couple of different ways. I think the Endermen from Minecraft are basically a weeping angel analog in that way. But like the idea of something that when you are observing it, can't move, and then when you look away or blink, it can move very fast. Do you want to talk about the best SCP of all time?
SCP-173 was, I feel like a lot of these were just kind of based off of like someone found a weird image.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then built a story around that. But this is some kind of almost harmless looking, like 8 foot tall looking.
Like looks like it's made of concrete.
Yeah, it looks real weird. Like it's just standing in a corner.
Yeah, got a big old bulbous head.
But the idea is that if you look away from it for a moment, it will bludgeon you to death in the blink of an eye. Yeah.
And the SCPs are this huge like creepypasta wiki basically that that people do this collaborative writing in. And this was the first one. It's the mimetic one. It's the one. If you're going to know an SCP, it's probably going to be this one. And there's this whole the brilliance of the format for SCP is that they spend a lot of time talking about all of the procedures you need to do to contain the thing safely. And so that's actually the first part you read. And so for 173, there's this whole protocol about you have to, if anybody ever goes in to clean the cage, they have to like have 3 people in there at all times so that one person can do the work and the other 2 can both just stare at the thing in order so that one of them can blink at any particular time. Yeah. It's really quality stuff. I'll make sure it's linked in the show notes for when we talk about it.
Oh, you're going to send our viewers down a huge rabbit hole with that.
Yeah. The good news is that SCP has grown so large lately that it's actually kind of hard to find the really good stuff. You can't just click on a random article and find the really quality stuff that used to be there. It's huge. There's so many now. I think there's.
I feel like they've added a few like best of categories or classics.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, so let's play around in this space a little bit. I love the idea of a creature that, when observed, is unable to move, but when it's unobserved, is super rapid and dangerous. That's got a lot of meat on it. Mm-hmm. And also, man, I got to give props. Weeping Angel is a fucking really good name for a monster.
Oh yeah,
like that has just an evocative image to it.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot. I think that we have to be. I mean, I don't have a biological approach to take on this one. Like that's sometimes our go-to is to sort of talk about how this thing might be a real biological creature, but nothing comes to mind on this one. Oh, except for I finally get to talk about the squonk. Can I talk about the squonk for a second?
Please tell me about the squonk.
So this is an American folklore creature that it's from the sort of tall tales that like woodsmen and lumberjacks used to tell the newbies when they're at around camp. And the squonk is a creature that is ashamed of its own appearance so much that if it is ever looked upon, it like dissolves into a puddle of shame. And that it spends all of its time trying to hide from being observed because of how like just literally how low its self-esteem is. And so I guess
I feel like Puddle of Shame would be a great band name.
Puddle of Shame. Yeah, man, that is a 90s alt rock band just waiting to happen. But yeah, so I guess you could have a creature that is just so ashamed of itself that like when you look at it, it freezes. Or I guess there's also the deer. There's a prey response when it's being seen by a predator. Some creatures just freeze up.
Mm-hmm.
Deer are the most famous of this, which is a terrible survival strategy when the thing that you are startled by is a oncoming Chevy.
Yes.
So I guess that could work, but I think we want to go I think we got to go weirder than that, right?
I do kind of like that it being more of a magical or metaphysical element to it rather than just a fear response.
Yeah, and I think that like in Doctor Who, they're basically just an alien. They're very old. They're from apparently the beginning of time. Although why they look like humans with wings, that like statues of humans with wings, is weird to me. I don't understand why that would be the form they take if they predate all humanity by like billions of years. So if we could find a way to sort of justify them looking like weeping angels, that would be kind of cool. Maybe it's something about adapting to the environment they're in, like, or that we made stuff to look like them. Like there's a justification for that, where like early interactions with weeping angels, like caused people to think about angels, and so that's where our image of them comes from. Although it's kind of hard to imagine this horrifying creature turning into like our version of, a servant of God. That doesn't sound right to me.
So that's actually kind of makes me want to dive into what we were talking about
Sure.
before the show, about them being sort of mimetic agents.
Yes. Yeah. This was my pitch in the chat.
And I like the idea that the reason they're still around as like these angels is because we gave them such a common or understood form somehow. Like these are the only ones left that we know about.
Right. Okay. So that there were other forms, but because they were more obscure and they've like those ideas have died off, we don't see that version of them anymore.
Yeah. Like maybe there was a version that took on this particular kind of form, and something went wrong and they just got stuck in there.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think we need to elaborate a little bit on what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
Kind of jumping the gun on that a bit.
Yeah. That's fine. Well, the idea is when I say mimetic, I mean in reference to the original meaning of the word meme, which is an idea that spreads from mind to mind. And so something that is mimetic is something that is like a mimetic creature in this way would be a creature that exists as a thought more than anything else. And so I had an idea that maybe the weeping angels they're mimetic in the sense that when they, that's the way I want to explain this, when knowledge of them enters into the world, when somebody learns about them, that actually instantiates them. Like they don't exist until somebody starts thinking about them or talking about them or knowing them. And so they don't exist until the moment somebody talks about them, says, oh yeah, there's a thing called a weeping angel. And then that causes them to exist more. And the more knowledge about them that exists in the world, the more they exist.
Yeah. So that actually kind of gives me an idea about like why they have that form. Like perhaps there was like some ancient tablets or something, or these things were at one point described as angels of God. Yeah. And so they have looked like different things throughout the past. Like when angels are thought of as like, 6-winged burning wheels or whatnot, awesome. That's what they looked like. Yeah. But now, like when information about these is found, when people think of angels, that's what they think of. They think of like people's garden statues. They think of, precious moments. Oh God, a precious moments angel just creeping up on you.
I'm still stuck on the burning wheel with 7 wings. That's a weeping angel I want to say.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
When we describe them, we actually give them form. It's totally in line with what I was thinking about. We are going to, by knowing them, we create them. And then I think that I love the idea that existence is excruciating to them. Like the more that people know about them, that causes them some sort of, maybe not physical pain, but like existential angst. Like they do not want to exist. They went from a non-existence into having some foot in our world, and that they don't like that drives them crazy. And so anybody who has knowledge of them and defines them and spreads that knowledge becomes a target for them, because they want to wipe out the knowledge of themselves entirely so they can go back to the sweet bliss of not existing at all.
That's a really cool idea. I think that's got a very creepy aspect too, where being chased by these extra dimensional murderers. Yeah. And anyone you tell about them now becomes a target.
And that it also makes like telling somebody about it, it's both dangerous for them, but also like it now makes another target for the creature that's chasing you. So like spreading the knowledge of them might actually like give you a little bit of reprieve while they go take down the other target. That's kind of cool. But at the same time, like maybe if you do that a lot, if you spread knowledge of them and like bring more and more of them into existence and like spreading that knowledge hurts them basically, they like view you maybe as a higher value target. So maybe there's a little bit of utility to spreading the knowledge, but then maybe also that puts you in greater danger too.
So with the idea of like existence being kind of like anathema to them.
Yeah.
In the original, the Weeping Angels, like when they catch you, they send you back in time.
Yeah.
Which we were talking about, and didn't really seem all that scary.
No, like you had mentioned, and I think I agree with you. The idea that like it's really scary for the people who are left, you know, it's fun to play with time travel in that way, especially for something like Doctor Who, which has time travel at its core.
Yeah.
But like once it's revealed that what they do is just send you back in time, and other than that, you seem to be fine. Like I can't tell you the number of people who like kind of fantasize about going back in time and like, oh yeah, this is what I would do. Like I've got all of this knowledge, and so I'm gonna like Yankee and King Arthur's court my way up through the ranks, and this is gonna be super awesome. So like, it's almost like I don't know, it just takes all of the teeth out of it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the SCP, which is doing the same sort of thing, the 173, just bludgeons you to death.
So there's a story by online author Wildbow called Pact.
Yes.
And this is spoilers for Pact.
Okay.
So be warned for anyone listening to this. There is a creature in that world that eats the knowledge of you.
Okay.
So it basically severs your connections to the outside world.
Okay.
And it doesn't kill you, but nobody knows you exist. And
yeah,
it basically destroys your connections to the surrounding world. So essentially, you don't die, you just never existed to the people around you. They don't remember anything about you. There's also a creature called the False Hydra, which is a really cool, creepy monster that was homebrewed for D&D, which I highly recommend looking up. But a very similar principle where it just kind of eats the knowledge of a character or the surroundings so that people forget they ever knew you.
So, and I have to, because I'm now tangentially associated with this property, Protean City Comics, one of their Doomed character, the character who's being tracked by Doom, has the exact same sort of conflict going on, where the old god that he stole his powers from is not only trying to reclaim the powers by killing him, but also erase all existence, all knowledge of him from all of time. And so like everybody he knows is slowly forgetting about him.
Well, that's a really cool concept. And,
yeah.
But I think that's a really cool idea that maybe there's like,
let me try a spin on that idea.
Sure, go for it.
Which is that they do eat, like I love that idea that they erase you from existence, right? And they remove all knowledge of you. And maybe if you stay in that state long enough where like you said, that you don't die, everybody just forgets about you and all evidence of you is erased, and therefore it also makes it very hard for you to interact with the world. And then the longer you exist in that sort of separate existence from the rest of humanity, the more lonely you are. That there might become a point where like you transition into a weeping angel of your own. Like,
ooh, I like
it becomes
that's really creepy.
Yeah, where suddenly any knowledge of you becomes painful because you're not used to it anymore. And if these guys exist extra dimensionally, right? Like maybe they exist outside of time. Maybe when you think of a weeping angel and you create one and instantiate it, that is you from the future.
Oh man.
That is your fate that you have just created and brought into existence. And it wants to erase, like it can't stand having this knowledge happen. So it has to stop you. And it does this by removing knowledge of you. And it ends up creating a stable time loop.
That's amazing. I love that.
You are basically being haunted by your own ghost.
That is probably one of the coolest monsters we've come up with.
I like
this
that.
far.
Yeah, I like that. I love that interstitial state where like it has removed all knowledge of you, in order to. And basically, that's an immune response, or not a response. It's a preventative measure, because if you can't interact with the outside world, you can't spread knowledge of the condition of the weeping angel. And so it's like applying a tourniquet to the wound, right?
Yeah.
And then you're stuck in that limbo state for the rest of your natural existence. But then when you die, and your physical form leaves, I guess in this world, souls exist because like your soul, whatever is the continuation of you from this point on, like is stuck in that same limbo still, and that you are destined to turn around and become like one of these creatures. And in fact, okay, so maybe it's not excruciating for them. Maybe they're just they're altruistic. You could take that spin on it, where this is a dangerous thing that can happen. So when somebody thinks of this, they are trying to prevent themselves from causing more damage than they already did. Like they are having to put a stop to it. You could take that either direction. I mean, I like the idea of that, like, you know, you're causing these things pain, and so they're just acting in a sort of self-interested way. But it also really could be, no, this is you from the future. Now that you have the knowledge, you've doomed yourself, and it is you from the future trying to prevent you from causing even more by telling other people about it and causing it to spread.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. I feel like that'd be a great twist to kind of drop on the player or the readers at the end of a story.
Yeah. We've sort of established the fact of the sort of stable time loop. I love that. But let's drill down a little bit on the mechanism by which their most signature aspect is. Whereas, like, if you look at one, they can't move, which I think is crucial to sort of the essence of this whole idea. And the thing that when we were talking before online, the idea that I had was that the more you know about them, the more they're observed, the more real they become. And that under direct observation, they become so real, so trapped into the physical form that they can no longer move. That you've sort of, by looking at them, you trap them in the stone that they appear to be. Because when you like are directly observing them, the like uncertainty sort of collapses about where they might be, and that's what traps them there. Does that sound good to you still?
Yeah, maybe because they're so real, like maybe they don't move by like the laws of our world.
Yeah, and I think that's
but they are completely bound by it when they are quote unquote real.
Yeah, they can't be observed to be violating the causality and rules of our world because I mean there are real actual like quantum physics types experiments you can do that it seems to be like there seems to be an observer effect on things. Most famously, if you're not familiar, there's the thought experiment from Schrodinger, which was that if you put a cat in a box with a cesium atom, I think it was cesium, he might have just said radioactive, with a radioactive atom that depending on if it degrades or not will kill the cat or not. And that while the cat is in the box and unobserved, it is both dead and undead. And he was trying to make a point about how you cannot observe particles directly without interfering with them. And so it like the actual ability to observe a target or a creature or an object or something like that actually has some effect on it. In the lightest sense, the most direct way, things like light falling on a creature like is actual interacting with its atoms. So and at a small enough range or a small enough scale, that light actually will bounce things around and cause them to have energy and things like that. And so this is just that same sort of real idea applied on a macro scale, that like if you have something observed that it like its place. Like, so actually this is almost the reverse of the Schrodinger uncertainty or undeterminability principle, where the idea is that on that one you can't know both its location and its speed. But in this case, if you know its location, you also by definition know its speed, because its speed becomes zero. Like you've trapped it. So that's kind of just a neat parallel between a real scientific thing and this idea that we're playing around with.
Yeah, I wonder if there's I've completely lost that train of thought. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. That's no problem. If it's not there, then we don't force it. We're just thinking about like the interaction between the observer and the creature when it's when you like, because looking at it, if you are interacting with the creature, then you have like perfect knowledge of its location, and if you were to observe it violating causality, which is essentially what it's doing. Like we're talking about, these are actually your future self, your dead ghost coming back to the past to prevent you from doing harm. And it just happens to do that in a freakish and terrifying way that's going to scare the crap out of you in the process. Yeah. Like it has to do that in sort of the gray area between you knowing about it, but you also observing it. Like it has to be in that sort of in between area.
So you have to know about it to be, I guess, absorbed into it and to close out the time loop.
Yes. Yeah, because if you don't know about it, then it doesn't exist. That future where you could become it won't happen. Mm-hmm. But you also, because if you don't know about it, you can't spread. You're not a danger, because you don't carry the meme virus in your brain.
I was almost thinking about like knowing about the existence of weeping angels versus like knowing about the specific one hunting you.
There's got to be different levels of knowledge, where like knowing that they're a thing, like maybe that's not a specific enough thing to like fully instantiate your future self, because you like if you heard the name Weeping Angel, you wouldn't be like, oh yeah, that's like that. You don't know anything about it. You don't know you don't have enough knowledge.
I love Doctor Who.
Right, exactly. But if you like, maybe the key to actually unlocking your future self is having enough knowledge that possibility might happen in the future, where like there's some threshold, like maybe knowing the what's a good level? You could say something like knowing that they're dangerous and sort of like the broadest mechanisms of how they work, that like they are real and that they hunt people and that knowing about them is dangerous. Like put those three facts in the same head, and that makes the probability that that future self might happen likely enough.
Or maybe just knowing that they are your future self is the trigger.
Man, I think they got to be triggered way before that. That seems too, like, if you know that this thing chasing you is you, I don't think that's nearly so scary, right? That's got to be a late stage reveal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. But I definitely like the idea that is discoverable. That's something that you can find out about about the Weeping Angels.
Sorry, I have a dog sniffing the microphone.
No, that we can just have another one of those episodes where there's just lots of dog. That's fine.
Yeah.
I've already established the precedent that dogs that appear in the episode get a credit at the very end. So, okay, so I think that maybe like the sort of pertinent three facts may be something like that they are real, that they hunt people, and that spreading the knowledge of them is dangerous. Like that's the sort of threshold at which point you are now a danger to spread that disease, that's the metic virus, and that's what instantiates your future self to come start hunting you.
Okay.
And maybe this is one of those things where there is an out, where if you die in another way before the knowledge of you is erased from existence, then you've both stopped the spread from you. Mm-hmm. You're no longer a vector for carrying the knowledge. And you've also violated the possible future where one of these things catches you and turns you into a weeping angel. So your future self can't go back. That's another way to close the time loops, to die in some other way, which is totally appropriate because these things are very obviously a horror genre monster. Oh, so yeah. Like giving you an option, an out for your character to be like, okay, great. No, gun to the head. I'm just going to check out now. Thank you. Also stably closes the time loop. And also prevents you from becoming one. Like you don't, because you've now closed that off, you can't end up as one.
That's kind of interesting. An interesting take on that. Is there any benefit or gain to be had from knowing about weeping angels?
Oh, I don't think so. I think that it's just this is a mind virus. Like this is a thing where an interaction between like knowledge and extra dimensionality and stuff creates something that is dangerous, but is also kind of self-stable because it closes itself off. It tries to create that stable time loop, and that there is maybe an advantage to spreading it temporarily. Like if you know about it and you tell somebody else, that gives you a little bit more time because it creates more instability in the timeline or something like that. And so it pushes off the one that's chasing you a little farther, or they have another target to go after because maybe they can prevent that spread earlier or something like that. So maybe there's giving a reason for somebody who is currently being chased by a weeping angel to spread that knowledge of the weeping angels does make sense to me from a story perspective. Like that's something that would be useful for having a plot happen.
So with these things being like kind of extra dimensional and not bound by the physics of our world when they're not being observed.
Yeah.
What are some interesting kind of twists that we can do on how they hunt you?
Oh yeah.
Like I kind of like the idea that maybe they can only travel along paths you've traveled before.
That's cool. Or yeah, either areas that you have physically been before, or areas that you know well, like something that you have knowledge of gives them knowledge of it because they know everything you know. So if like you go back to your childhood home where you know every nook and cranny, then they're also going to know every nook and cranny. And like in that way, you're almost safer in an unfamiliar place.
Yeah. I like the idea that they can only show up in places, like they can show up anywhere you're aware of.
Yes.
But anywhere you haven't been before, like they have to follow you.
Yes. Yes, for sure. And then also, I mean, one of the natural consequences of the way they are is that they're only going to appear when you're alone, or when you're in a group of people who already all know about Weeping Angels. Like you're never going to, like if you're in a crowd, you're relatively safe. But that means that like you can't go home and go to sleep because that's dangerous, because now you are unobserved and like there aren't people around to keep you safe. So like maybe getting yourself arrested and sent to a prison is actually like a reasonable like survival mechanism, because
interesting.
You're constantly being surveilled.
Do things like cameras or video recorders count as far as observation? Or is it only when you observe like the video, or maybe like they don't actually get picked up on camera?
No, I think the weirdest option is that they have to be observed by someone, but it doesn't matter when that observation happens. So if somebody's literally looking at a camera feed with a television, they're staring at the television, and the Weeping Angel appears on that screen, they get trapped the same way they'd get trapped normally, because they can't be seen to violate causality, right? If it's just a videotape where they're being recorded on a camera, then it matters is, will that tape ever be watched? Right?
Oh, interesting.
So if when they're being in the field of view of a camera, if in the course of the timeline nobody ever watches that tape, then they're free to do whatever. But if somebody watches that tape in the future, then they get trapped for the period of that tape where somebody is watching it.
Oh man, it's a headache to write for, but I love it.
It's so weird that I can't resist it. It's such a weird idea. It fits into that shelf stable time loop idea that we're talking about with these creatures. Like they have a really hard time violating causality, and they exist outside of time. So events in the future affect them now. Yeah.
So do they suddenly like, do they become aware of being recorded at the time it happens, and like suddenly have like, well, now I got to go delete the footage for this, or destroy the camera or the tapes? Or is it just like, well, crap?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that in order to give them, like in order to ever catch them, right? They can't have perfect knowledge of the future or their past, right? Like, otherwise they'd be infallible. They know the future timeline, so they would just make all of the right decisions. You'd never catch them ever for anything. So we've got to make them fallible. So they probably don't know what those things are, and they can't, like if they get caught on a camera that's being taped and that somebody is going to watch that tape, they can't go back and prevent that from happening because that violates causality. So it gets them stuck.
Well, I also kind of like the idea of like getting imprisoned kind of through this idea of like a scenario where our protagonist is fleeing his own Weeping Angel and commits a crime or whatever to be imprisoned, and is now sitting in one of those interview rooms waiting for someone to come interview, and the Weeping Angel shows up in there. Yeah. But it's all on camera. Yeah. The guy watching the tape later is like, what the hell is that? Yes. And like it's frozen there in that scene now. Yeah. But when he looks away to like bring someone over to his desk, it just vanishes from the thing and it's gone from the rest of the the tape.
You're like skipping through, like you're watching a video camera or you're on a you're looking at the files, right? Looking at the video feed, and you see this statue and you're like, that statue doesn't isn't supposed to be there. Let me fast forward a little bit. You fast forward a little bit and it's moved, but then you watch it, and while you are playing the tape, it can't move. But then you fast forward again and it moves again, and you skip forward.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah. That's a lovely image. And so imagine that during that's a fun narrative moment where like one person is literally being chased by one of these things, and it's not only moving, like sometimes it's getting trapped when they're not observing it because it's in the field of a videotape that somebody is going to watch in the future, but they're skipping around, and then you have to show that scene later to pay it off.
Oh yeah.
Nightmare to write for, but I love it.
Yeah.
So what we were talking about them removing the knowledge of you from the timeline, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's sort of the mechanism by which they deal with you. But we also have been talking this whole time about them like physically chasing you. Like they've got to run you down and do something to you.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to square those two up somehow, because it sounds like if they're going to be erasing the knowledge of you, they're mostly doing things about like, it seems like the natural thing is that they're going to go find people that know you and like attack them and remove the knowledge from their brains. So what is it about chasing the person who knows that they're actually like, how does that mechanism actually work? Because I do want them to chase the person who knows. That's the narratively satisfying thing to do, I think.
I feel like, I feel like the end goal is to sort of like touch them, and like the touching is what closes out or like merges the two entities.
Yeah.
Destroys the links to the surrounding world.
Okay, so the closer that they come to you, the more that they are collapsing the timelines between you becoming a weeping angel and not. And that's the world in which you kind of don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like, it literally is just a proximity effect of like, the closer that they ever get to you, even if you then manage to run away, you know, that they have like upped the point and more of the evidence of you has fallen off. And then if they actually get a hold of you, they do something that like collapses the waveform and makes the probability of you becoming the weeping angel in the future. Maybe that's the moment when they tell you that they are you. Like,
ooh,
I'm trying to think of like, okay, so what they've got to do, like we were talking about, they have to be observed, right? So what they're going to do is they're going to like grab you and hold you and like turn you away from them so that they can speak, because they can't move at all. They can't even move to talk when you're looking at them. So they're going to like shove you against the wall and like cover your eyes and like whisper in your ear.
Are they even able to cover your eyes? Like if you, like the moment you observe them, they suddenly become...
Well, no, so that's like you have to blink, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you blink, they move rapidly during that time, right? And so like you blink your eyes and suddenly there's a hand pressed against your face, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's one of those things where like if you see part of them, they can't move that one part.
Oh yeah.
Or maybe they're just like they're literally holding your eyelids closed and you can't open them ever again, like while they're doing this. So I think there's a writing way around that.
Because they're this otherworldly entity, even if they're you, they're not particularly concerned about harming you.
Yeah.
So they might remove your eyes.
Yeah, they could. Although, and maybe that depends a lot on who is the weeping angel. If you were the type of person who might just be expediently about, like, I'll just remove the eyes, that's the easiest way to do it, then your weeping angel will do that to you because it's you. Whereas if you're a more squeamish individual who wouldn't like to do that, maybe your weeping angel also wouldn't. So it kind of matters on who it is. I
also kind of like the idea of like playing into that weeping aspect where if there's just blood pouring down from the eyes of the victim.
Yeah. I mean, that's a totally great image. Yeah. However, I mean, I could see it working multiple different ways in that way. But then the actual, like once they've got you trapped and they're holding you down, I love the idea of them whispering into your ear, like, you fool, you have trapped me in the time limb just as you are trapped, because now it just explains the whole thing out to you. And in doing so completely collapses out the uncertainty and like locks in this timeline. And that's the point at which no one remembers you ever again. All of the evidence of you ever existing is gone. And you are trapped to live this limbo out for a while until you die and become one to go back and hunt yourself.
That's really cool. So what happens when you've got your dynamic duo, the two people who are now aware of weeping angels fleeing, and one of them gets caught? What's that experience like for the person left behind? Do they remember the weeping angels, but not the person who told them about?
Yeah, I think it's got to be, I mean, we're in an area where it's maybe a little bit more, or like, yeah, I don't know. That could go a lot of different ways. I don't think that once you've been infected with the mind virus, I don't think you, like, there's no way out for you other than to die, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it kind of, maybe it depends on how much knowledge of a weeping angel they have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if I'm Mulder and my Scully gets infected with the weeping angel virus, is being chased, and I haven't yet tipped over into the point where I am now a target myself. I am just, you know, my Scully does tell me some stuff, so I'm like, okay, you know, they mentioned that they're being hunted. They mentioned the name Weeping Angels, so I know a little bit about them, but not completely, and I haven't been flipped over yet. Then as the Weeping Angel hunts them down, my knowledge of them decreases and decreases, and I forget them eventually. Like maybe if we're really close, I'm like the last person to forget about them. But right at the end, once they are captured or die, and the time loop closes out, then I forget about them. In fact, I also forget all the things they told me, and so that you know, like that removes the Weeping Angel from my mind at that point. Like maybe they're
okay,
yeah. But if I have already tripped over into the point where I am now a target, like I know enough about them to have instantiated my own future Weeping Angel, then when they die, at least that knowledge, like maybe that memory, like they can't get rid of it anymore because I've already instantiated my future self.
Maybe that's part of why Weeping Angels are so hellbent on preventing the spread of their knowledge.
Yeah.
Is because they can't completely close out the time loop until everyone who knows about like them that are linked together have their knowledge erased.
Yeah. And okay, and I like this. If you die before the Weeping Angel catches you, you know, commit suicide, or you are killed by something else before the Weeping Angel catches you. You've been infected, but you haven't killed it. That doesn't close out the time loop properly, because anything that has been erased from memory until that point happens. But you've stopped the your own Weeping Angel from preventing any further damage at that point. So any evidence that you've left behind is still out there. Anybody who still remembers you, and you've left this, like all of these spores, these mind spores out there in the world for somebody else to start pursuing, and thus accidentally instantiating a new one. So Weeping Angels, like if they want to prevent the real spread of this mind virus of themselves, they have to catch everybody. They can't let anybody get away, including people who die. Like you have to catch everybody. And so it's this, it's a virus. It's a disease that's spreading out from mind to mind.
That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, this is cool. And then, okay, so did we come down on something on why they look like angels? Is that, maybe it's just, they look like what you expect them to look? Is that what we were saying?
Yeah. I feel like they are like when you become aware of them, like what you become aware of them as depends on how they are described to you.
Yes. So if somebody says, "Oh, they're the Weeping Angels," like in fact, the creature we're talking about could have been named after the Doctor Who creature. Like Doctor Who exists in the fictional world we're talking about, and so somebody trying to explain to someone else what these creatures are, they're like, "Oh, they're like the Weeping Angels
from Doctor Who."
And so to the people who are on that strain of the mind virus, they're called Weeping Angels because that's how they get described from person to person. But if you just describe them sort of by the attributes that you actually know, right? Like the things like they hunt you. If you observe them, you can't see them. If somebody says instead, "Oh no, they're like SCP-173," then for the people who hear that, they're going to look like SCP-173. Or if they get described as something,
that's really cool.
Yeah. Or if they get described as like a non-Euclidean math horror, right? Like a creature that cannot exist in this dimension, then when you see one, that's what you're going to see. You're going to see something, you know, like something out of a Lovecraftian nightmare.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah. And that explains a lot about how they might be perceived from person to person. And it gives a lot of narrative freedom for you to have them appear in a lot of different ways, you know? Fantastic. So, sorry, viewers, if it turns out that us describing all of this to you has now doomed you to be hunted by your own future self that wants to prevent the mind virus that we just created from spreading further. But
I mean, we are the only two who know about them. So
Right,
we
so-
need to provide some other targets.
Exactly. I mean, like, I just got to throw our future selves off of the trail by providing some additional people. So I just need to package this.
It's the most efficient way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. We just package this up into an audio file somehow and maybe upload it to an RSS feed for other people to listen to. And then that's fantastic.
In this episode, we murder our listeners.
Yeah, this is good. Yeah, I like the idea that as scary as these things are, they don't just bludgeon you to death, and they also don't, like, I like the dooming you. Like, I like the aspect of it as a creeping doom that you kind of would know about, you know, and that it ends in a moment of like severe intimacy where they've got you pinned and are holding on to you and then just telling you what's going on. Like, that is such a creepy, such a creepy moment.
And I love the idea that, like, you're like the whole time you're just expecting to like be killed or maimed or whatnot. And then when it delivers its message, it's just gone.
Yep.
And you're like, okay. But then you notice you have no ability to affect the world around you.
Yep. People forget about you. They won't even talk to you. You're invisible. 2 episodes in a row, we've talked about this like liminal, like the weirdness of being forgotten by people who still exist. And being unobserved, traveling through the world unobserved. Although before it was sort of peaceful, and now it's like horrifying.
You can go live with the Bigfoots.
Go live with the Bigfoots.
Big feet.
Big feet. Yeah, this is cool. And like us joking about dooming our listeners beside, this is a lot like an idea that I've been playing around with for years, and I could never really get the format to work. But the idea of like it was literally going to be a book called "Reading This Could Get You Killed." Lay out, would be from the perspective of somebody who is in the middle of this whole problem and writing it out as a way to sort of help anybody else who's gotten into the same situation and like giving them advice about like, okay, well, here's what you do. You need to find a public space where there's lots of people. You need to find somebody to watch you while you sleep, because otherwise you can't sleep. And eventually you'll go crazy if you can't sleep, like all this stuff. And the thing I could never get around was it has to have an ARG. I think that this idea would be so good as an alternative reality game where you don't tell anybody what you're that this is a piece of fiction that you're writing. You just start introducing it into the world and throwing it out, you know, in that sort of verisimilitude. We're just going to present this as information and see if anybody goes off of it. Would be so cool. It'd be so good.
Yeah. Like, I feel like if you could get just like a Twitter account out there, just every so often posting life tips for surviving the mimetic assassin.
Yeah, basically. And then, I mean, the trick, of course, would be coming up with multiple different Twitter accounts and YouTube accounts and Facebook pages and things like that, so that you can have all that groundwork laid so that as things go on, people will discover, oh, hey, this account tweeted at this other account. Let's go read through its past history. Oh, look, there's a bunch of other part of plot that we're going to find here. That would be super cool. I do not have the time and energy to make that all happen, but I would love to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be really cool.
Yeah, I love that. I also love the idea of a creature that that can't have a name almost. Like any particular version of it's going to have a name, but like you could have it by like so many different descriptions, so many different monikers, you know, comes off kind of like the thing, you know, like it's just this thing. Like we can't really, naming it gives it like attributes, and like not naming it helps us prevent other people from catching it. Like giving it, if you don't want to, I was talking about the 3 pieces of knowledge earlier, where it's like that they hunt, that they're dangerous, and that they're real. Like maybe that could be the trigger point, is when you name it. There's so much power in the point of like giving something a name. And so it really could be the point at which either somebody tells you a name for this thing, or the moment when you have to name it yourself because you keep thinking about it. And like maybe that's also a nice threshold of like, oh, well, you know, nobody's told me what these things are called, so I'm just calling it Jimmy. And then that's the point at which the probability tree flips over, and you might become, you know, Jimmy exists now, you know. Or it could be me telling you the relevant information and saying these are called weeping angels is the moment when I doom you, because I've given you a name for these things. And that is that's one of the litmus tests for whether they exist for you or not.
That's cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Well, these are This is a fantastic version of this. This is so much better than the Doctor Who version. I like it a lot.
I think so.
It would be so hard to bring into a property like that, just because of the sort of the nature of how kind of esoteric they are. They need some explaining. But also, there is also lots of value in a horror property of not explaining things, like figuring out all of the rules yourself and then holding back some of that information so that your audience maybe can figure it out themselves, or maybe they can't. But like knowing something really well also sort of removes the mystery and some of the scariness of it. So
like if you could make a movie out of this, like Primer, but horror.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Complete the time loop in the course of the film. That'd be cool. That would be really rad.
Yeah.
And then just not explain, like, don't show everything. Don't show all your work. Have it done. Know that it all makes sense, but then leave it as this big mystery, because unanswered questions will keep people thinking about it. And for the people who, like enjoy like unanswered questions and ambiguity, a lot of the times the things they come up with will be better than what you wrote. Like this is something that lots of writers get away with, is like, the horror you don't describe is so much better than the one that you actually do in that way.
So going back to that, the idea of like what happens when the weeping angel catches you and it closes out the loop.
Yeah.
I love the idea of like sort of the mental process you go through as you realize that you can't interact with anything.
Yeah.
And then you start realizing that, oh, hey, I can go back in time and stop this.
Yes. It changes. Like, what's the name of the movie with Jeremy Renner and Amy McAdams, I think? It's the one with the aliens.
I'm not certain.
It's the Arrival.
Arrival,
okay.
Right.
So one of the central tenets of that story is spoilers for Arrival here. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is a thing of linguistics, which is the idea that having words for things changes how you think. And so, like, if you are natively speaking in a language that has linguistical gaps in it, then you have a hard time talking about and thinking about those ideas because you don't have words for them. And that over the course of Arrival, the main character, spoiler alert, learns a new alien language in which time is a flat circle and time is like something you can move across the timeline, and it actually changes her perception of what that timeline is. And that like gives her knowledge of the future because she is able to perceive the dimension of time in a different way. What we've been talking about this whole time comes in along those same lines, where the more information that you've been given about these creatures, the more real they are, because they're also changing your perception of what reality is and making the timeline where these things, where the future you will come to be more likely and more powerful. And then that last moment of them catching you and transmitting the knowledge is like a Sapir-Whorf hypothesis moment, where like they tell you stuff like time is not real, like time is not moving in one direction. Time moves in both directions, and it all happens at once at the same time. And transmitting that knowledge to you allows you to perceive time in that way and sets you down the road toward trying to prevent it, just like you're saying. That's fantastic. And it also, then giving them a name thing also gets tied in thematically, because now you have a word for it, and now you have an easier time thinking about it. Naming things is the same as giving it, it linguistically gives you a handle on which to grab hold and manipulate an idea. I like the way that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, that all ties in really nicely together. That's fantastic. Well, I think we've got enough material for us to close this episode out here.
All right.
And we will catch you guys later. Bye.
All right. Till next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Monster Mechanics. At the time of this recording, near as I can figure, we are 100% review free, but you can change that. The obvious choice is iTunes, but I don't blame you if you want to avoid that trash heap. You could always try Podchaser, or just tweet at MonsterPod and tell us what you think. For now, the sweet dopamine release of hearing our work praised is the only salary we can draw from this project. Okay, call to action over, on to the credits. Monster Mechanics is produced and edited by me, Scott Paladin. It is co-hosted by myself and my best friend, Zach Jaquays. Today's episode featured a nasal guest appearance from one of Zach's dogs, Pico. All of the ideas generated during this podcast are released under a do what the f*** you want public license.